What we have here is a last generation PowerBook. When Apple discontinued the PowerBook in favor for the first generation Intel MacBook Pro, they actually carried over most of the design of the aluminum PowerBook. It was a fairly new and innovative design at the time, and I guess they realized that it wasn't really worth scrapping, and instead they just sort of kept it, and they made a few tweaks here and there, and in typical Apple fashion they made sure that not one single part could be moved from one to the other so that future serviceability would be an issue. But anyway, this laptop came to me through work. One of my coworkers who had retired last year, who had worked with us for over 35 years, finally bought herself a new MacBook Pro, and it was time to get rid of the old PowerBook. So I got it with the expectation that her data would be wiped away and the laptop would be responsibly recycled. She thought I might like it because she knows I'm into old computers, so naturally I took it from her. So this device is and the only reason I accepted it, the only reason I took it home with me rather than send it to the recycling bin, is because it is in such fantastic condition. You generally don't see these in this condition, and for a couple of reasons. This particular aluminum body is prone to cosmetic maladies, ranging from denting to scratching to the anodized coating actually chipping away. They also tend to be abused, and just like any laptop, you know, they get bumped around, dropped here and there. The problem with these aluminum-bodied ones is that the aluminum is so damn soft that it doesn't take impact very well. It tends to crush. One of the most common problems you're going to find with these aluminum-bodied MacBook Pros and PowerBooks is the aluminum on the side here will tend to buckle outward, usually around these ports. I see it all the time on the MacBook Pros. It also happens above the latch, right about here. You'll see this aluminum just sort of buckling outward. A number of years ago, I actually found one in the trash that was in exactly the condition I'm describing, and it was pretty beat up. But it was a good running machine, and I ended up selling it for about $100 or so. But anyway, and naturally you've got a PCMCIA slot right on the side here, and I believe that was carried over into the MacBook Pro line. You've got your audio in, audio out ports right here with a single USB 1. It might be a 2.0 port. Built-in modem. Imagine that. And on the other side, we've got, of course, our mini DVI, Ethernet, which should be gigabit on this, S-Video, which was not carried over into the MacBook Pro, and we've got our HDMI, which is quite interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, that's FireWire 800. FireWire 400, FireWire 800, and USB. And our, if I call that an HDMI port, please understand that I'm tired. This is a DVI port. Okay, DVI, HDMI. It's just acronyms to me. Okay. Oh yes, on the bottom, you've got your battery, which we'll talk about in a minute, and you've got your memory card door. So again, no dents, no scratches, no scuffs, no chips, nothing. It's just incredible the condition this thing is in. And all 4 feet are still intact. Oh man, good times. Oh yes, a couple of more cosmetic issues, and then we'll continue on to the meat and potatoes of this video. So the PowerBook G4 aluminum was also the first Macintosh laptop to feature a backlit keyboard as an option on certain models. This was, I believe, one of the only 15-inch models to feature this. I don't believe the 12-inch ever got the backlit keyboard, and I think all the 17-inch models did. The backlit keyboard is backlit by a couple of LEDs implanted into the keyboard base, and the keys are made from a transparent plastic that has been sprayed with an aluminum look finish. It's basically paint. And one of the problems with these keyboards is that the aluminum paint, it's like a aluminized paint, it tends to wear off, especially on keyboards that are used heavily. And that reveals clear plastic underneath, which transmits more light, which causes excessive light pollution if you're using the backlit keyboard at night. Just a minor annoyance. It really isn't a functional problem. The other issue is that the keyboard and the display have so little clearance between each other when the lid is closed that even the slightest amount of pressure on the lid during transport or storage causes the keyboard to come in direct contact with the LCD panel, scratching the polarizer permanently. Now, this is not a problem unique to the PowerBook G4. This also occurred on a regular basis on the MacBook Pro first generation. There just wasn't enough rigidity in the case design. There's enough flexion and not enough clearance to make that an issue. And this is a minor pet peeve of mine, but when you close the lid on this model, and again, almost every MacBook Pro that I've ever seen with this type of latch does this. But you'll notice that the display kind of bows downward a little bit. So if I put some pressure on this corner, you can see that it raises the other corner quite a bit. Same thing here. That's just a pet peeve of mine. I think it reflects poorly on Apple's design, and I have never seen one that doesn't have that problem. I believe I remember unpacking them when they were new, and them having that problem. So this is just a nitpick issue. But Steve Jobs, being the king of nitpicking, I'm surprised he let that happen when these were sold new. This is the last laptop, by the way, for the round barrel type charging port. It was the first gen MacBook Pro that received the MagSafe. Now, I'm not going to get into the semantics of exactly which model was released a couple of weeks later. It doesn't matter to me right now. So if they had actually, in all honesty, I believe the 12-inch MacBook Pro, the 12-inch PowerBook G4 was released a couple of weeks or maybe months after this one was discontinued. So technically, actually, the 12-inch the 12-inch PowerBook G4 may have been the last to use the barrel connector. So, if you're really into semantics and nitpicking, there you go. Okay. Can you tell? This is like the 11th take of this entire video, and I'm getting really tired of this one. Making a video of, just a side note, making a video of a laptop that really is unremarkable in every way is just, I know people are going to want to see this. I know this is what my viewers want to see, but it's so boring to do this. It's taxing on my brain. But I gotta do it, because I gotta do it. Gotta keep the viewers engaged, and I hope I'm doing that. I hope I'm doing a good job of that. All right. All kidding aside. This laptop does not feature a multi-touch trackpad. To right-click, there is no double-click tap or anything like that, or double finger tap. You actually have to use the control key to bring up the context menu, which is one of those legacy Apple things that I'm glad to see have died. It's like Apple was really, really adamant that, you should only have one button on your trackpad. And I don't, the single button mouse, single button trackpad, I didn't quite get that. I mean, they expect you to use hotkeys. Okay, but give me the second button, because I'm going to use it. Even to this day, Apple still resists two mouse buttons, and they do that passively by using touch-sensitive or finger placement sensors on their mice and trackpads. Okay, whatever, Apple. Whatever, we have 10 fingers. Let's use them, huh? So I got to empty the trash by using control click. Just annoying to me, that's all. So this one has been spared almost pretty much all the typical problems associated with the G4s. So, like I said, this was owned, I think I may have mentioned this in this particular take, I'm not sure if I did or not, but this laptop was owned by a teacher who, this was her daily driver up until 2 years ago when she bought a new MacBook Pro. And it doesn't look like it. It looks like something she bought, maybe used once or twice, put it back in the box and forgot she owned it. But the reality is this was a daily driver for a teacher for its entire life. And she just took very good care of it. And I suspect that she might have used an external keyboard and mouse, just a hunch. But I don't know for sure. This particular version does include the Bluetooth option. Let's take a look at the exact model and go through its full specs. So with the exception of the 80 gigabyte hard drive that it shipped with, I replaced that 7 years ago for this person with a 250 gigabyte Western Digital. And that is still humming along without a problem. But with the exception of that, this laptop is bone stock. It's never been upgraded, never really had any service done to it. It is a PowerBook 5.4, which makes this, dates it back to about May of 2004 when it was built. It has the 1.5 gigahertz CPU, 512 megabytes of RAM, expandable to 2 gigabytes, and the serial number indicates that it was made in Shenzhen, China, I think it was. It was actually a Foxconn production. This was not made by Quanta or Compal or any of the other vendors. It features, I want to say this has gigabit Ethernet built in. Let's take a look. Built-in Ethernet. Let's see, does it tell me? Does not tell me what the maximum speed is. But I believe these are gigabits. For 2004, it should be gigabit. May not be, though. I should look it up, but I'm not really willing to right now. It does have, of course, FireWire 400, 800, Bluetooth, and an Airport Extreme built right in. The Airport Extreme, by the way, can be removed and replaced by removing the battery and opening a small flip-down door, which I might show you later in the video. Let's get to the good stuff. What the hell went wrong with this model? Now, these were in production for approximately 3 years. The aluminum PowerBook G4 was released sometime in, I think it was mid to early 2003, and discontinued in mid-2006 for the introduction of the first-gen MacBook Pro Intel. In that 3 years, they had so many problems, including a scandalous recall. This model is known for two major faults. One of them, and both of them requiring a motherboard replacement. One of them is the random sleep issue. And there have been numerous workarounds and attempts at repairing that problem, including replacing one of the ambient light sensors. But ultimately, I believe the Apple authorized solution was to replace the motherboard. What would happen is the laptop would be running fine. All of a sudden it goes to sleep, no matter what you're doing, and no matter what the conditions are, and no matter what the sleep-wake settings were. It was a minor inconvenience. Okay. The other problem, now this was serious. Now you've got two memory slots on that board, and the lower memory slot had a tendency to just stop working. So let's say you had two 256 megabyte modules in there. All of a sudden, you've got just 256 and that's it. And the only way to use the machine is to just put the biggest memory card that would fit in the remaining slot that worked as you possibly could, which would be about a 1 gigabyte card. So, I mean, that issue can be worked around. And there was I believe you could run some terminal commands that would disable the sleep function altogether if you had the sleep-wake problem or the random sleep issue. But both of those are issues that severely limits the resale value of this laptop and limits what it can do and how well it functions. Apple did issue a repair extension, at least for the memory issue, possibly for the sleep issue as well. There was another problem that involved a fairly severe, a very seriously widespread recall on batteries. I remember this quite well. I had just started working where I work now. I believe this was in 2006 or 7. And there were reports of laptop batteries exploding And this was one of the models that was caught up in that recall. And I know this particular one wasn't the Sony battery, it was the LG battery recall, because LG had a similar problem to Sony. And judging from the serial number on the battery, this one may have been swapped out under the recall. And I believe they never officially ended that recall. If you still had a defective battery, as far as I know, they were still swapping them out. I don't see an end date on that one. But if it falls under the right serial range, you would be eligible for a new battery. Now, let's say you had one today, and you called up Apple and said, hey, my battery is recalled. They would probably laugh at you. They probably don't have any remaining batteries left in stock that would be usable, but it's out there. Check into it if you have one of these. Man, oh yeah. No camera. They didn't have the cameras yet on these. That was the MacBook Pro that started that whole webcam thing as standard equipment, or eyesight camera as Apple calls them. So I do suspect this battery had been replaced, as it still holds a charge and holds it quite well. I ran this for a while on the battery and I didn't have a single problem with it. So that's quite interesting. Now, while we're here, I have nothing else really to tell you about this. But let's go ahead and take a look at, oh yeah, one more thing. Now, working on these laptops is incredibly difficult, I find, because Apple used a lot of tape back then. They taped a lot of things down with Kapton tape. They've got all these random interconnect boards that are wrapped in like a plastic sheathing, and it was the end of that era of laptop design. Actually, no, it wasn't. I think the unibody was when they stopped doing all that crap. But I found it interesting that the Bluetooth board is actually in the display hinge. You've got your air port under the battery, and you get your Bluetooth board like in the hinge. And there's a lot of wires and cables and flex cables and stuff in this thing. The motherboard isn't just one board; it's multiple boards, kind of split apart. It's a fairly complex design, and definitely wasn't the most reliable, even when they carried over most of the design into the MacBook Pros. I had a lot of service issues with those myself. We bought a whole bunch of them for the administrative department, or the administrative level staffers, and each one of them had issues at some point. And anyway. So while we're here, I want to show you this. This is I've got a tie book too. Now this tie book I've had for a long time, and I use it as a bridge computer. In fact, I'm actually currently using this to get that Mac Classic up and running. I use this to transfer files downloaded from the internet into a format that my Mac 575 can read. And this is running 10.4. But I want to show you the design side by side. It's quite striking. I mean, they're very similar. Well, they're really not. I mean, they're not really that similar. The only similarities here is the body color is a metallic silver, a level of silver. You'll notice that they were kind of a two-tone on these older G4s. I prefer this, by the way, over that. Let's just compare them side by side here. You've got a nice, beautifully finished charcoal keyboard with translucent keys. No backlighting, but hey, it's 2001. But over here, you've got, these aluminum keys that tend to wear out pretty quickly. I like these better. I do. Most of the system, well, actually, two things you can do by removing the keyboard on this, by unlatching it and flipping it up. You can replace and upgrade the RAM, and you can replace or add, if you didn't buy it from the factory, an airport card, which is kind of nice. This one, that's all done from underneath. This laptop is actually much thinner. In fact, if we close them up here, let's see, side by side, they actually got thicker when they went to the aluminum models. Check that out. A little bit thicker. And a little bit larger. the G4 TieBook was a little bit sleeker, I think. The slot loading super drives are in the same location in the front right side. And the latches are fairly similar. These use a magnetic latch. There's a little arm that swings down when it comes into contact with the magnet that's embedded into the keyboard edge. And that is how the display latches. In fact, that was a design that was carried into the MacBook Pro, first gen. Listen to that drive. Same display size, but interestingly, the display on the TieBook is positioned higher because of the hinge design. On the aluminum MacBook Pros, they went to a sunken hinge design, and honestly, this was a better design. These hinges tended to last a lot longer, whereas these used to freeze up and break off. This one is probably pretty close to that, honestly. It's not, I mean, it moves pretty smoothly, but I don't think I trust it for too much longer. Speakers got bigger. The speaker grills did anyway. I mean, yeah. The sleep light, which I wish Apple still believed in, was located right here, and was still visible from the top, whereas on the G4 aluminum, they actually placed it into the latch assembly right here. Basically the same trackpad, same design. But this one is just a more pleasant machine to use. It weighs less, it's thinner. I think it's more stylish. It has that nice two-tone look going on it. And the titanium finish, I believe, is a little more durable overall. At least it looks better than the aluminum. But anyway. So what else can I tell you guys? I got nothing. That's it. I'm done for the day. This is it. Thank you all for watching, and thank you for giving me a reason to make these really bad videos. And by the way, both of these laptops still run just fine on their batteries, so thought I'd point that out too. Have a good night.